You got to get the monkey off of your back that you can't win game ones. It's a bad streak. It's honestly, over the last 2 decades, in my humble opinion, outside of not beating Alabama, it's starting to become the second worst thing that's happened to you in the last 20 years at LSU. Now, there have been some bad things, a couple of bad seasons under Ed Orgeron. That was what it was. But you had multiple national titles through that run. And you know what? I'll take it. I'll take 2019 for the last 2 years of Ed Orgeron. Sorry, I will. You fired him. He's out. You got Brian Kelly in. Time to go win another natty. But to me, this is got to be the biggest game on your schedule at the current moment. I know that it's game one. I know that that's coaches speak. Because if you start off the season 1-0 and you got some games, after that are very winnable. You're more talented than every team that you're going to face after USC until you get to that Ole Miss game. Could you imagine a world where you start off 5-0, 6-0? Guys, if you do that, the likelihood of you going to the playoffs is extremely high. If you lose this game, the slip-ups in the SEC are very minuscule, right? Very minuscule. You know, Brian Kelly only lost 2 SEC games in the first year in the regular season when he was at LSU. Tennessee and Texas A&M at the end of the season were the only 2 that he lost. Now imagine the perception of Brian Kelly or that year in 2022 if you can actually block in a extra point scenario and you kick the extra point versus Florida State. You know, people are going to I was going to say something about Jaden Daniels. By the way, did y'all see him in the Nissan Heisman house? Love everything about it. Y'all accuse me of loving Jaden too much. I will accuse you of loving this guy just as much. Yes, I do. I am a Jaden Daniels stand account. Nevertheless, you got to start off 1-0. You got to sell everything out, and you cannot go into this game not. How do I want to say this without getting myself in trouble? You cannot hold back punches in this football game. You got to show them everything that you have. Doesn't matter what happens throughout the rest of the season. You can figure it out. But if you're in a dire situation, all punches got to be thrown. I do think the mentality from the coaching staff and the players has been vastly ramped up this week and last week. I'll tell you this before we start with the 5 keys. Last week when we were at practice, when we talked about the practice report, the conversation that you and I had was, you know, practices in spring and even in fall camp have been pretty intense. But this, you know, the last week, coaches had ramped some things up. Like, hey, man, it's time to go. Like, the season is here. We have no margin of error. Talked to a coach today, on-field coach. And he told me that same intensity the Wednesday that we were out there has maintained. I do think that the intensity has continued to ramp up, especially on the defensive side of the football, mainly due to the fact that you got to show who you are as a program. Last year was just a blimp in the radar, was just a mistake, not going to happen here again, and you get back on track to who you are. But let's get to these 5 keys to victory. I think that they're more focused. Here's what I'd say. I think they're more focused now than they were going into Florida State a year ago. And I think that being focused, however, does not win you football games. It doesn't win you football games. But the intensity, in my humble opinion, I feel like there's more focus and players locked in than what you had a season ago in the opener. That's not going to – that means nothing when the ball's kicked off. But There is something to be said about how you prepare going into a game like this. Look, these are in no specific order. They're just not. So don't call me out with your bullshit when I read these off and you say that I'm a hater, because it's just not true. Number one, guys, you have to limit turnovers and you have to limit bad mistakes in the passing game. Listen, I think that they are a little bit, meaning USC, a little bit down on the boundary. They went out and got 2 safeties, one of them from UCLA. They got a really good middle linebacker from Oregon State. Where I do think that what we haven't discussed has been the boundary. You cannot be lazy with your throws. You cannot be lazy with your timing. You cannot be lazy with your eyes when you're trying to throw off a safety. Garrett has got to be more locked in than he's ever been locked in before. I know that so many people have said nationally that Lincoln Riley teams are soft, that they're a joke, that they're not any good. Guys, I'm here to tell you, they have a lot of talent, pure overall talent on the defensive side of the football. Let me give you one example. The linebacker that they got from Oregon State and Arnold was the Pac-12 middle linebacker of the year. Now, you could say, well, Blake, that really doesn't mean anything. So was Omar Speights, and he came here and wasn't that great. Omar Speights is now the starting middle linebacker for the LA Rams. If I would have told you at the end of the season that Omar Speights would be the number 1 middle linebacker of any NFL team, you would say, Blake, then they had a lot of injuries or something bad happened or just Matt House sucked. Do not sleep at them in the front 7. Don't sleep at them at safety. They have playmakers. When you're going across the middle, Garrett has got to be locked in. If he's getting pressure, don't put the ball in harm's way. Take the sack. Try to scramble. Get positive yardage and get down. You cannot give Lincoln Riley more possessions. Here's an interesting stat. In the years that Lincoln Riley had a turnover margin that was +3 and above, so meaning that his defense was serviceable and they got turnovers, the best defense that he had was in 2019. Now, LSU absolutely whipped that ass, and I get that. They still made a playoff. They were still a quality team. Guys, did you know that 6 players on that defense at Oklahoma is still playing in the NFL? All I'm going to say is don't give them the ball back over silly things. I don't think Garrett – I think Garrett could throw a pick, but in reference to him going out there and just over and over again giving them the football is not going to happen. I think that they're going to give him easy throws to start off the game. They're going to give him easy throws to start off the halves. I think that they're going to be very conservative early and then explosive late once Garrett gets into a rhythm. Listen, Garrett has the ability to do whatever he wants on a football field when it comes to throwing the football. Let me say this again. Garrett Nusmeier can do whatever he wants to do when it comes to throwing the football inside the pocket. He's got to, has to, no questions about it, has to make sure that he's limiting his bad decision-making. Go run the ball for 6 yards and get down. If you don't think that you can make a throw and that it's too tight of a window and you got a little bit of a crease to get 6 yards, take the 6 yards. Guys, positive yards will win you football games. Can't turn the football over in the passing game. Can't turn the football over in general, but outside of John Emery, we haven't seen any of these running backs have fumbling problems. That's why I didn't put it in there. Number 2, guys, you got to control the football game. What do I mean? You got to line up and run it right at them. I know that's been a topic of conversation that you and I have had all week. It's going to continue to be one here tonight. Guys, Lincoln Riley does not want to huddle. He doesn't want to move slow. They are one of the worst teams in the Power Four when it comes to time of possession. They average around 25 to 27 minutes in time of possession a game. They don't care. Their goal is to get up to the ball, confuse you, and score. That is their philosophy. Well, keep your defense off the field then. Give them the rest that they will need and keep them on the sidelines and wear down that USC defense. Line it up, 12 personnel with your really good 2 tight ends, and let Josh Williams, let Caleb Jackson and Caden Durham and John Emery line up and punch them square in the mouth. Get Will Campbell on those counter pulls. Run right at their ass. And you know what? If you're getting 3-4 yards of carry, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you to line up and do it again. Because if you're getting the ball 4 yards of carry, they're not going to stop your ass. Guys, if you run the ball for 4 yards every carry, they're not going to stop you. 4-4-4, first down. First down. Line it up, run it right at them. Here's another thing when I talk about run the football. It's not always handing the football off either. Another thing that I think that they're going to do, actually, I don't think. Here's the deep nugget for you at 4 p.m. if you've shown up. I think they're going to throw Josh Williams the football out into the flat. And they're going to try to get easy yardage that way and get Garrett really easy throws. Here's another thing. They're going to do some bootlegs and they're going to do some waggles with Mason Taylor and Kamorian Pimpton. And I know a lot of people will say, well, Blake, that's not really in the running game. But when you have a tight end in the flat, I'll take that as an extension of it. There's a lot of debate around that philosophy. I subscribe to, look, if you're going to go play action and throw it in the flat, it's an extension of the running game. You're just trying to do outside zone because here's the truth. Your entire offensive line is run blocking anyway. That's all they're doing. Let me talk about Caleb Jackson very quickly. Guys, I really hope that Caleb Jackson lives up to the ability that I think that he has. I am very bullish on him. I think that he is one of the best, and I mean this. I think he is one of the best running backs in the entire conference, and I think that there's going to have to be times in this game that Frank gets out of his own way, Wilson gets out of his own way and lets Caleb Jackson take over the football game. Guys, he has that ability. Now, how has Caleb done in pass pro? How has Caleb done in other situations? That remains to be seen. But him and Josh Williams are the keys to your victory. I think your offensive line is going to be good, but there's going to be tough yardage that you got to gain in this game. Put your head down and knock somebody's fucking teeth out. Go full Bobby Boucher and knock somebody's teeth out. If you believe that USC is not a physical football team and Lincoln Riley's teams are not physical, do you know what you do? You line up and smack them in the mouth and tell them to come get some. I really believe that Caleb Jackson's going to have a big game. I really do. Him and Josh have to have big games. Have to have big games. The one thing that I like about what I've seen from Caleb this camp, I have not seen the ball touch the ground. And I talked about turnovers at number 1. It's very fair to say the same for number 2. Very fair. And he's got to. All of them have to hold on to the football. That includes John Emery, because I think you're going to see John Emery in here too. I really do. Final thing on the run game. Guys, Josh Williams, I don't know if Josh Williams is ever going to play a down or a snap in the NFL. I really don't know. What I do know is you need him, and he's going to be all reliable, and he's going to be there for you. Like I've mentioned of Josh Williams before, he's the Toyota Tacoma of running backs. He's all reliable, man. He's going to get you 400,000 miles and keep on running. Now, you got to keep it serviced. Pause. But I think he can do it. All right, that's number 2. Number 3. Guys, I think that USC is going to move the football on you, and I think they're going to score. And I don't think that you're going to come out and stop them like you're the 2011 LSU defense. I think that is, clearly not something that you can think or expect from this defense. But man, you got to make their drives difficult for them after they hit the 20s. Hold them to a field goal. Let them go for it on 4th down, and you get a big stop in the red zone. Guys, I really believe last season that you did have a lot of times where you were in the right positions. Guys, scheme was a bad issue with Matt House, but it wasn't everything. I go back and watch like the Ole Miss game today. Matt House, I mean, look, man, there was so much bad tackling in that game, 30 plus missed tackles in that game. That ain't got nothing to do with Matt House. And you could say, well, Blake, he's supposed to teach him tackling. Guys, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I mean, that's more on want to and willing to. Guys, when they complete a short pass on you, tackle them. When they run the ball for 3 yards, make sure you're getting them on the ground quick. If you are unable to tackle like you did a year ago, and the inability to tackle like you did a year ago, this team's going to this team's going to score 40 plus points, and you're going to get in a shootout, which reminds me, I am 1,000% terrified of you getting in a shootout with them. I am petrified. Petrified? No, I couldn't live without you by my side because I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong, and I grew strong. I know I hate this damn song. Anyway, you cannot get in a shootout with these people. You can't. You cannot play Lincoln's game. To that credit, you got to make sure that you're selling out for the run. That's what I would do. Guys, if it were me, it's not me, but if it were me, I would make sure that every time that they tried to run the football, it would be hell on them. It would be like pulling teeth. It would be like trying to take candy from a baby in the opposite direction because they're going to cry. If you have kids, you know that old saying is horse shit. Man, the worst thing that you did a year ago was tackle. It's not. Let's call it what it is. It's not close. It really isn't. Blake, we had busted coverages. We didn't line up. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You did some bad things at times too. A lot of other bad things at times too. But man, you got to be able to tackle and have the 1-2. Other part in this number 3 in tackling. Guys, what is Harold Perkins? Is Harold Perkins going to be the guy that we have seen all fall camp? If he is, I feel 2 billion% better than what I would have felt if he had not had the camp that he had. Clearly, he has been all over the place. He's been making tackles for loss. He's been getting sacks. He's been knocking passes up in the air that get picked. He's been picking off picking off passes and getting interceptions his damn self. When you have a playmaker like Harold Perkins that can be an ultimate game changer on defense, it makes the ability of the offense so much more difficult in things that they want to try to accomplish. Guys, if your defense is better, there's one player that's going to show out more than anybody. That's going to be Harold Perkins because he's going to be in the middle. And listen, Perk has got to be disciplined. Perk cannot, and I know that linebacker is more of a new role for him, but he has to be the most disciplined player on the field. Let me tell you why. And I will tell you why I think that Brian Kelly Blake Baker gave him the comms, because he's going to be on the field the whole time. Blake's going to be in his ear. But after 15 seconds, he's not going to be. The dynamic of what Blake Baker can do with him can be game-changing. Guys, it can be season-changing. Perk has got to set the tone with his play, because then it will trickle down to everybody else. Make some tackles. Number 4. Listen, there are a lot of people who have different opinions on me on things that you need to do when you're on defense. But being passive should never be one of them. Last year, USC, and really last 2 years they've been this bad, but last year, USC was 98th in the country in sacks allowed. Guys, if you cannot get after Miller Moss and you can't make plays on this offensive line at USC, then you have a problem. Doesn't mean that O-line for USC can't develop. They got a lot of big-body dudes. They got a lot of really highly recruited guys along that offensive line. If it's me, I'm sending all-out pressure on them all night long in Miller Moss. Guys, they gave up so many tackles for a loss a season ago. They gave up so many sacks. I know that playing man-to-man, bump and run, man-to-man coverage on the outside is not necessarily something that LSU fans get very high for, because the USC wide receiver room has some really good players in it, like Zachariah Branch, Lemon, etc. But, man, you cannot make Miller Moss's life comfortable. You can't rush 4 every single play. Hell, quite honestly, I wouldn't rush 4 hardly ever. But if you cannot get sacks and penetration on this offensive line at USC, that means that you have a bigger problem than maybe that we're willing to admit. How is that interior defensive line going to stack up? Because it wasn't just in the passing game last year that USC struggled with the offensive line. It was the running game at times too. There were times late in the season where they got really pushed around. Really pushed around. Can you force them and Miller Moss to make mistakes because of the havoc that you're creating in the backfield? Wilson Alexander of the Advocate wrote an article today that Blake Baker had stated that he wants to get the quote-unquote what they call a havoc rate up to 25%. Guys, if he does that, you're going to a playoff. But what is he really trying to say by creating havoc in the backfield? He's saying that we're not going to pussyfoot around. We're not going to sit on our hands. We're not going to just play soft zone coverage. We're going to get after their ass. I agree with him. If you're going to get beat in the secondary anyway, right? Like if you're getting beat in the secondary anyway and you're playing this soft zone coverage and you're giving things up, why not send pressure? At least when you send pressure, you do have the ability to get home and get to them. So number 4, you got to get to Miller Moss and you got to get sacks. You got to get sacks. If you can't, it's going to be a problem. Number 5, last but not least. Guys, something we rarely talk about. Hardly actually, and believe it or not, I know that I've talked about a little bit more than most during this offseason, or at least when we've talked about USC. You cannot be and cannot have special teams blunders. Listen to me. USC is not good at special teams. Guys, they are elite. They were number one in so many different special teams categories across the board last year. It's not just block punts. Not just block punts. Because they put so much focus in what they do on special teams that if you are lackluster in all three phases, and that being the third phase of football, if you're lackluster in that one, those small itsy-bitsy things can come back to bite you. Now, here's an interesting thing that we have not discussed either. Xavier Thomas is going to be ready to go. Hamstring's a lot better, looking like that he's going to be ready to go. Xavier Thomas is a freak show with the ball in his hands and punt and kick returns. Can you start making some of those special teams gains, and can you maybe take a punt return back for 30 yards and set your offense up in really good scoring position? It's been a very big-time blunder under Brian Kelly the last two seasons. It really has. Quite honestly, guys, it's been a big blunder for you even since 19. The only one that was worth a shit in returning punts and kickoffs, really and truthfully, on any given basis, was Trey Palmer. And a lot of you LSU fans didn't like Trey Palmer. Told you. By the way, had a great season in the NFL last year. He did. He did. When we talk about all three phases, if you're lackluster and undisciplined and unfocused on special teams, USC is going to win this football game. They're going to win this football game. Guys, they don't suck offensively. And you got a lot of things that you got to prove on defense. So we'll see. All right.